Hello.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Cult Bar.
Gonna get
Uh,
all the smiles out on the top of this show because we're not gonna have a
yeah.
lot.
No, unfortunately yeah, it was funny because when we were talking about what to do with this show, I said, "Oh, this guy's name is great. I feel like we need to do this." And turns out not so great.
Yeah, it's not all designer jean jackets and fun names, it turns out.
No, no, it is not. So, yeah, first of all, before we start tonight, what do you got
I
to
got
drink?
a Cadillac margarita because I'm a child of God and God wants me to have the best.
God wants me to go first class.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll get to that later. But yeah, basically it's just a fancy margarita with expensive liquor in it. It's not that special, it's just more expensive.
hmm.
And no salt because I didn't want you guys to be staring at salt stuck to my lips.
Hmm. Okay, so I went with Battle of the Alamo cocktail, which the people we're talking about tonight, their last name is not pronounced Alamo. It looks like Alamo. It's Alamo, but still, I wanted to do something on that. So this is basically just rye whiskey, mezcal. I forgot to add simple syrup, Angostura bitters, and gunpowder tea. So I missed the simple syrup, which would be nice because that would lend it a bit of sweetness. It is pretty
Yeah.
bitter. It's pretty
Is it
bitter and
okay
burny.
without it?
It's okay. It makes me want to try to. The problem is mixing in simple syrup in a glass that has one of these giant ice cubes in. Probably not a great idea. So, yeah. Anyway,
So should we get to our longest trigger warning we've ever had?
yes, please do.
This one's going to be intense. So as always, there's religious abuse, high control relationships. This one is specifically Christianity, kind of the fire and brimstone type. We've got domestic violence. We've got violence against children. We've got sexual assault against children. We've got desecration of a corpse. Financial crimes, but I guess I don't think that's a common
No, but
trigger. But
financial abuse too.
oh,
Yeah,
there was financial, yes, and then also slave labor, and I think that's it. If it's not, I will try to catch it before we get into anything, and then several of those also apply to our news item. The only thing the news item has that this cult doesn't is murder. So,
yeah. So
whew.
basically, almost all the trigger warnings you can think of, and just be it again, as we say every show. If there are trigger warnings and they mean you don't want to watch it, please don't. It's okay. We
Yeah, or just turn off if you really want to watch this and there's something you're worried about, you can always watch the rerun on YouTube, and you could ask me or Doug where that stuff is so you can skip it. That's a
yeah.
service I'm willing to offer.
Yeah, so feel free to comment in the stream here, and we'll answer it. So that we know we can help you along with that. So yeah, it's going to be a big one. So basically, this week we're going to talk about the Ministry of Evil, which what a title for a docu series. It's the Ministry of Evil, the twisted cult of Tony Alamo. So, like I said, I had never heard of them. Had you ever heard of them before this?
No, but when I was talking about the jean jackets, my husband said, "Oh, I remember those jackets."
Yeah, I remember those too, but we'll get to those. Sorry. So normally I give an overview, but because this is 4 episodes and there's a zillion things to get to, and we said it a lot. This is the thing that I watched. I took by far the most notes on, to the point that
you had to stop.
Yeah, well, my notes app on my phone said you can't type any more characters, so so I had to switch to an email and just kind of fill it in there. So there's a lot to get to. So what we're going to take a different approach tonight. We're going to basically go episode by episode. We kind of do that in an overview in a general sense, but we're really going to do that because some of the episodes we can kind of go through a little faster, and this way we're going to be able to touch on as many things as we possibly can because there's a lot.
Yeah. And actually, the other thing is there's some chronology in this story that I wasn't 100% clear on.
Same.
They kind of update you what year big events happen, but you're not always sure where the personal stories fit into that.
Mhm.
Um, so it would have been, yeah, it would just be like impossible, I think, to do it purely chronologically because this cult started in 1969 and is still operating.
Still going.
Yeah.
Still going.
Yeah. That's spoiler alert because I was on the edge of my seat. Like, when,
Yeah.
oh no.
Yeah. As we do with most of these, keep continuing afterwards, even because there's always some people that can't let go of it. But yeah. Before we start with our dive into the Ministry of Evil, why don't we do a smidge of cult news?
So,
Okay.
oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Um, this one is not exactly cult news. It's more just high control relationship. Again, child abuse and medical abuse in this one. If you followed this story at all, there's been a couple documentaries. There's been like a dramatized series. It was a big deal when it happened. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was a child who was a victim of Munchausen by proxy her entire life, to the point of having like surgeries she didn't need. Um, she was drugged when she went to doctor's appointments so her mother could say she had mental impairment. She had a feeding tube she didn't need. I mean, like really over the top Munchausen by proxy. And she conspired with her online boyfriend to kill her mother so she could escape. She is being released from prison early. Personally, I feel like this is good news. I had some really uncomfortable feelings about how we define self-defense in a situation like this when someone has so much control. I mean, she wasn't allowed to walk because if someone saw her walking, they would know she wasn't really paralyzed. So that's a level of control that's just impossible to imagine getting out from under. And, she was hidden from her father her whole life. She didn't know her father until she was already in jail.
Hmm.
So, yeah, like I say, maybe it's a controversial opinion. I'm not sure, but I'm really happy for her. I do feel that with as bad as her life was, that prison was probably better. But hopefully now she can find a real life that isn't controlled by someone else.
And for those who might not know, I mean, you kind of laid it out a bit there, but Munchausen's, might be mispronouncing it, by proxy is basically where a parent controls their kid by claiming they have all kinds of medical issues. And it reminds me of The Sixth Sense with that one bit where the daughter dies and tells the kid that shows them like where the videotape is, and the videotape reveals that the mother was poisoning the kid.
Oh, see, weird fact about me.
Spoiler alert, 30 years later.
No, I've never seen it but that's why. Because I didn't watch it when it came out, and then everybody talked about the twist. So I was like, well.
It's still a good movie. So anyway, I kind of agree with you that this is good news. Now, again, say, well, murder isn't justified in almost every case. I can see the point there, but she did her time, and the penal system actually is releasing her. So, good
And I
luck in
think
finding her.
she was an accessory to murder, actually.
Mhm.
And I think that's where it gets complicated in whether it's self-defense or not. And then also we've seen with other people who've escaped um, illegal imprisonment being tried and sentenced for murder, even though they were being held hostage, basically. So it's
Yep.
just a complicated story, but I really feel for her. And I hope that, starting your life at 32 years old is not going to be easy for anybody, but I hope she gets a good chance at a good life.
Me too. Okay, let's get into it.
Whoo!
Woo, baby. So,
How do
I
we
guess
even do an overview?
I don't know. So first, like I said, let's start off with the idea that their name is like I'll share with you this is
Alamo.
it's Alamo, but it looks like Tony Alamo, and I was like, this guy's name is Tony Alamo. We got to talk about him because holy shit, what a name.
Yeah.
So
But
first
it's
of all,
not his name.
it's not his name. He changed his name like 4 times.
Yeah, this is just his last name.
Yeah, and he was trying to break into like the record industry and told people he was a record executive. Like,
Yeah.
he and Susan, who was his eventual wife, were both con artists. And it's what I find funny is the idea that they're both con artists and they fell for each other to create larger cons.
It's just really important to have things in common with your life partner.
Apparently, let's cheat people out of money and everything. Yeah, but they did
But
way
I
more
like
than
to
that.
grift. Do you like to grift?
Yeah. So it starts in 1969 in Hollywood because in the 60s, everything started in California with all the stupid cults. So so many of them, so many. So yeah. So where do you want to start? Because that's just kind of the early bit. I know we
Suppose
want
we
to talk
try
about
to
Susan,
do episode 1 chronologically, right?
if we can.
Susie Alamo, who I don't think they ever say what her maiden name was.
No, not in the docuseries. No.
She was a single mother who wanted to make it big in Hollywood. So she moved her and her daughter to LA. She got a job. I've never heard of this job before. It's fascinating to me, as a B girl at the bar. And I know, okay, I've heard of this in Okinawa, actually, but never in the US, where the girl's job is to sit and convince men to buy her drinks. But what the man doesn't know is she's working for the bar, and the bar is serving her like tea.
Yeah.
So that's how she started. I don't think there was very good money in that. So she came up with a really good con because her daughter had a beautiful singing voice. And they even had a name for this, doing a church.
Mm-hmm.
And so she'd take her daughter in, and she'd be the guest preacher that week, and her daughter would sing and get everybody in their like religious euphoria, and she would talk about all the missionary work she was doing in Mexico. And then everybody would donate money to continue the missionary work, and then she would leave, having never been to Mexico and never planning to go to Mexico.
And never leave, having left the state of California.
Yeah. If that's where it stopped, I'd be like, hey, good for her.
Yeah. All right. So you cheated the church out of some money. Awesome. Good on you.
You probably shouldn't use your kid in a con, but as far as it goes, like
not a good look. No.
Real missionary work has its issues too, right? So.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
So her daughter, who they call Chris, and I'm glad, but they actually never pronounce her full name, which is, it looks Irish, maybe.
Chrysathion is the closest I can get to it. It's an interesting name.
So I'll call her Chris.
Yep.
They didn't say it out loud. Her daughter is one of the people who does a lot of the talking in this and sets the timeline. And basically she says the organization was always, her mom ran it, and Tony was like the extra baggage. Now other people said basically he was the business side, she was
the gospel.
religious side.
Yeah, the gospel was.
So it depends. I mean, Chris doesn't have any love in her heart for Tony at all, and not a whole lot for her mother. So she's got bias.
Yeah, understandably so.
So anyway, they get married. This origin story is so goofy because they say it's like she was out looking at all the hippies and was like, they need to be saved. But I feel like that's not true.
No.
I feel like it was more like, they look like good marks.
I think it was also more, like they were good marks. There were a lot of those kids were like rich kids who were, disillusioned and just kind of being able to kind of rip them off of money. And what's funny is she shit on hippies repeatedly about like every time. So they kind of get, we didn't touch on one thing that I think is just fucking nuts, but okay. Tony, when he was claiming he was a record producer, claimed he had promoted the Beatles.
Right, of all the things to claim.
Like, wow, man, you're just going full
we know that story, and they are in England.
Yeah, not in so whatever. But so they basically get together, and when they met in a bar, of course. And Susan's line to him was something like, did you know that Jesus Christ is coming back to earth? because she had been doing this church grift thing. So she
Well-
thought, go ahead. Sorry.
Because she also believed his grift. This is amazing. They
Yeah,
were
this
conning
is
each
great.
other.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was great because Chris said at the end, neither of them could pay the bill for their drinks.
Right. Because they both thought the other one would cover it. Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So they get together. What's interesting is they start their church, which I think didn't it start as Alamo Christian Ministries? Is that how they named it at the
I
beginning?
think so. Well, I know that it's called that now, and that the actual like legal name was the Susan and Tony Alamo Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they refer to the foundation quite a bit. So
yeah. So yeah, they well, and so also they didn't really tell us when this radio show started. If the radio show started before or after she met Tony.
Yeah, they didn't make that very clear. It's kind of implied, I think, that they started it together, and
yeah,
So
they're doing radio evangelism, I guess.
AM radio, baby.
And yeah, you know that thing that when you actually hit the AM button that you're like, oh no, that. And then like they progressed to actual televangelism, which is a theme almost to the end, which is funny because it comes back to this thing that these people just love to record stuff. I don't know why.
Always. Yeah.
Mm.
We have a few comments before we get too far down the road because our friend Zach's commenting, so that's going to be a good time. Go Zach, man!
I bet you
do that.
In the cash.
Good on you. And then Manny, he's a cereal guy. That's his whole he does Cereal Brothers. That's like his.
I remember because we had this cereal milk conversation, and I was not. My opinion was not respected.
And then, okay. It's true.
Okay, not the last one.
Yeah, not the last one. We'll leave that one out. Zach. Sorry, Zach. So they start the church in 1969, like you mentioned. And I messaged you this because it's within a year, they had 200 followers living in a 3-bedroom house.
Yes. Well, here's the other thing. I thought this was really funny. And I don't know why particularly I find it funny, but they did ocean baptisms. And to me, like, river baptisms are a thing. I know that. But like saltwater seems like weird. I've never heard of saltwater baptisms before.
Either, but I think it was what they had. Like otherwise they were going to do it in a bathtub, I suppose.
Well, yeah, and they were picking up people off the beach. So just come on over here, dunk.
Yep.
Move into our house with 199 other people.
Yeah. And I believe you're right, Zach. That is against the application.
Yeah.
So that just astounded me because I mean we've had cults before where they have like way too many people living in little places, but that was even more than I think we talked about. Like what was was it the family?
The Source family, yeah.
The Source family. They had a lot of people, but I don't think it was
they
that
had
much.
Much bigger house.
Yes, this was not a big house. It was a 3-bedroom thing in Hollywood.
And they kept getting code violations because no kidding, right? There's no way. Even if there wasn't a maximum number of adults allowed to live in a single home, which there is, just like the noise of 200 people.
Yeah.
I just can't, like, also the plumbing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like how people couldn't take shower. Like you were lucky to get a shower. Like it was like not something that people got because there were just too many freaking people. So
I hope their water was metered.
I bet.
I don't like them, so I hope it was.
Also, imagine the stench of that house with that many bodies in that restricted an area because that had to be just stinky.
And showers not being available regularly.
Yes, exactly. But because of all these code violations, they decide we need to get the fuck out of here
to the promised land of Arkansas.
Well, before that, they moved 45 minutes north of Hollywood.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about the North Hollywood, the Saugus place, right?
Yeah, because they wanted to isolate people more.
And then everybody just does hard labor and gives all the money they make from hard labor to Tony and Susie.
Yep. They'd get their checks, sign them right over, and voila. So we get it. They talk about this a bit more, but how they basically claimed because they filed like something with the IRS to be a nonprofit organization and all this so that they didn't have to pay taxes.
I think they just called themselves a church. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they proclaimed that all these people were volunteers and that they provided them, and these people were told and brainwashed into believing that they had all their needs met, even though this is completely illegal what they were doing.
They were told after Tony and Susie bought their Cadillacs. This is a Cadillac. This is a Cadillac ministry. Eventually, we'll have enough money that you'll all have big houses and Cadillacs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very much the prosperity gospel stuff that we hear now.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I think is really interesting about it is because I was kind of thinking about that in those early days when Tony and Susie kept buying beautiful clothes and jewelry and beautiful home. Why they never ask questions, but I think it comes back to something we've talked about before, where it's like in order to like prevent cognitive dissonance, you have to buy whatever weak excuse they give you, because if you don't, then you have been performing free labor and living in a house with all these people and not getting a shower, making all these sacrifices for a couple of con artists. And that is not acceptable. And so you say, okay, well, maybe whatever excuse they gave us is true.
Mm-hmm.
And which they never actually say what excuses they gave, because it was like the former members very much were like, we just believed in them.
Yeah, it was never, they were never, you're right. They never really specified. They just were told to sign over their checks, and they did. Yeah. But as they proclaimed they were taking care of it. And this line kind of stuck with me when Chris was talking about the mothers and the groups. The Alamos would give them cloth diapers.
Mm.
And sometimes they wouldn't have water to wash those diapers. So those diapers would get maggots in them.
Mm-hmm.
And then Susan would blast them for being lazy moms for not having clean diapers.
And we hear from a member named Susan who said she worked so hard that she was incapable of holding her baby at the end of the workday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I cloth diapered my kid.
I didn't.
It's hard to get them that bad. I never did. But it's impossible to do it without water. So it's
Maybe just take them down to the beach.
Yeah, no, that's worse. Yeah, that was horrifying to me. And then, like you say, she was on the pulpit and rips them apart and tells them how awful they are and cites the problems that she is causing as their fault. And I think that's another thing we see a lot in these religious abuse situations. And this becomes a theme as things go on. Whatever happens to you is your fault. It's because you didn't do something you were supposed to do, or you did something you weren't. And so you can't actually be upset that Tony or Susie did this to you, because it's your fault.
Yep. So there's a whole much more we got to get to. I'm sorry, but
all right.
So they do a few things here where one of the things that was very interesting is very small. It doesn't really have much to do it with, but there was a guy from Rolling Stone who was able to get in there and report on this. He saw at one point 125 people sleeping in one room. At next to impossible shower. Food was bad. Whatever food that the Alamos allowed them to have was bad. It wasn't good food. But he said he never saw any beatings or brainwashings, which definitely happened, but he just didn't see them.
And he said, like, I was a guest. They were making sure I saw the best, which is terrifying.
That was the best. Not being able to shower or shitty food. That was the best.
So a couple other things I think we need to hurry up and get to that matter later.
Yeah.
Susie's faking cancer this whole time. Pray for me to be recovered from cancer. I've had terminal cancer for 6 years, and the good Lord is keeping me going. That's going to be important later. Yep. And also, they had a TV show where they would have members of the church come on and talk about how they're not a cult, which, guys, anybody has to tell you they're not a cult, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
And the parents even said, like, the amount of hard labor they were doing affected their judgment. And one last thing, they were very spare the rod, spoil the child kind of ministry, and there was a room to beat your children in the church.
Yep. To beat the devil out of them.
Yeah, Susie's daughter, at 20, had a child of her own. She wanted to leave because she was terrified that they were going to abuse her child, and she was told she couldn't leave because she knew too much, and she was beat nearly to death. Sorry, she had 2 kids. She was able to leave with one, but the other kid's father was a member, and they used that as leverage to basically get her to agree not to report anything, and they gave the kid back. And then the members who liked Chris or missed Chris or had sympathy for her were beaten.
Yep. Good times. Like,
yeah.
Oh. Yeah. That might actually happen, but that's not been my experience.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but it's usually frowned on to beat babies.
Yeah.
Except for in the churches we talk about.
Yep. So we have that. So Chris does get out with her kids, which, good on her, but that was a tough out to get out.
Right. And then in episode 1, they flee to Arkansas and start a new compound. And then this kid, Benji, his story is rough.
Yep.
He was adopted by Tony and Susie and told that his mother was dead and burning in hell. That's going to be important later too. And my hot take on this, because there's a lot of the adults who were children in this church talking about being preached to about hell and how terrifying it was. Mm-hmm. And I think they did it in a particularly damaging way. But I feel like talking to kids about hell is inherently abusive.
Agreed. Like my wife was brought up in a super evangelical Christian thing, and the fear of hell was a huge thing for her, like, because they do that in evangelical Christianity too. Is it's a big thing, is to beat it into their head that, oh, well, if you don't act right or you're not good, you're going to hell. You're a sinner. You're always going to be a sinner, and your goal is to try to fight that to get into heaven. And to think that you're going to burn for eternity when you're a little kid is just, little kids, their imaginations are gigantic. So you just think that that's going to be your eternity. Like, that's terrifying.
And then also, as a result of this terrifying fear of hell that the adults also had, but obviously they made a choice to be there at this point. The adults in the group at this point had a choice. They joined. Mm-hmm. But they would report on each other. They would report on their own children. Everybody was reporting on everybody, because it was also a sin to not make sure that somebody who did wrong was punished for doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And punishment was always physical.
Yep. And we will talk about the physical punishments, but we have to get through this bit. But
30 seconds left to talk about episode 1.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it to a half hour for each because there's just so much to get to. We wanted to breeze through this one a little bit, but there's just too much.
Turns out we couldn't. Oh boy.
Yeah. So
that doesn't bode well.
Like you said, they moved to Arkansas. What I think is funny, one person said that Chris said that her mom hated Arkansas, but she knew the lay of the land and how it worked there. So when they moved to Arkansas, they moved to like a small town in Arkansas. They didn't move to Fayetteville, which is a city. They moved into a small town.
Well, and the other thing I thought was interesting is the juxtaposition, right, is that Susie was preaching to the members that Arkansas was the promised land, where Chris knew that her mother did everything in her power to get out of Arkansas and never wanted to go back, but it was a good place to keep the con going.
Yeah. Now, as far as where they went in Arkansas, what I found interesting is they said that it was near the Texas and Oklahoma border so that they could move about and get away from the authorities if they got too close.
Yeah, which is smart, but terrible.
Also devious, and state lines do come into play later too. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So then they had a restaurant that was very popular, which was run by volunteers. And we see Dolly Parton and the Clintons and a couple other famous people walk through there.
Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah,
Some real big names.
Tammy Wynette, I think. A lot of country singers, but also
Yes.
some other celebrities. Dolly comes up in here again. I was like, man, Dolly.
Yeah, that's now. Here's the thing: is it's something where she clearly didn't know what was going on. She
Oh
just,
yeah, no, I don't for a second think that she like.
but it's one of those things where you're like, ugh, not a good look.
Oh, but you're like, you're good. You should be so far away from these people.
Yeah,
Hank Williams Jr. Like whatever. I'm not surprised.
no, racist. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
so here's my favorite part of the story, and maybe this is cruel, but I don't care. She was a horrible bitch. It seems that Susie manifested cancer. She told everybody she had cancer for years and years and years, and then she gets diagnosed with cancer. And when they opened her up, they just closed her back up. They're like, doesn't matter. There's nothing we could take out that would help.
You're just riddled with it.
Yeah, that's what you get. If only every cancer grifter really got cancer.
Yeah, like I don't wish that shit on anybody really, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, well, karma, all that, but but to claim like she proclaimed that shit, and they would tell like the people if she was not feeling well that it was because they weren't praying hard enough, so they put all that shit on the parishioners and all that shit.
Yeah, Susie's health is God's barometer for the health of the church.
Yes, that was the phrase, and what a fucking phrase.
And she wasn't even really sick when they were saying that.
No.
So imagine when she actually was sick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
we
then
get
she
to that.
died.
Go ahead. Yep, then she died. But Tony was a bit worried. He was worried they weren't going to follow him.
He was worried about losing all those houses and all that money.
All the Cadillacs.
Also, I think this might be a situation a little bit like Herb and Bonnie in Heaven's Gate, which we haven't covered them, but I
No,
think
we'll get to them at some point.
there's a possibility, in my opinion, that he did genuinely love her and dealt with that very poorly. I think there's deviousness here for sure, but I think there's also like some really fucked expressions of grief as well. Because I think you could be devious without going as absolutely batshit as he does.
Yes, I agree.
Because he refused to bury her. He put her in an open casket in the middle of the living room, and everybody had to come in and pray for her to be raised from the dead. And he found all these scriptures that said that, I mean, they just showed the phrase raised from the dead, so I don't know the context. They didn't say what verse it was, so I couldn't look at it. But he found the scripture to say that this could happen, and people were basically in 2-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, praying at her casket for her to be raised from the dead. And this continued until she started to rot.
A year. A year.
Yeah. And I'm assuming she was embalmed because
It had to have been.
it would have taken long. But this is the thing that's really interesting to me about that, Doug. Because they're like, it took a year and then she started to visibly rot. And I was like, wait, would they take everything out when you're in? She, like, people who believe, like, that on Judgment Day that the dead will rise, like, they don't want you to be embalmed or cremated because you need your body.
Yeah.
But they embalmed her. That was a weird, like.
I hadn't thought of that, but yeah. Walking, getting up. I have no guts.
Yeah. Of course, and it was all their fault that she didn't come back to life.
Yeah.
But
still, just the creepy idea of just keeping a dead body and making people come in and shifts. They would make them do it for like 2 hours and just pray for 2 hours for her to rise. Like, what the fuck?
Here's the other thing that's interesting about the story. One of the women who talks a lot in this documentary says her father was very close with Susie and Tony, and he was there in her final hours. And he says she called Tony over to her grabbed him by his collar and pulled him to her face and told him, in no uncertain terms, do not continue this after I die. You will ruin it.
Yep.
Do not do it.
The phrase that it was Rebecca whose dad was, and she said, I think,
Oh,
don't, you're going to destroy this place. Please let these people go.
don't continue this. It's wrong. I had it in my notes too. I just didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she had a little bit. So, because there was a lot of talk that there was a possibility that yes, she's obviously a con artist. She's obviously a grifter, but she did have some element of belief. And I wonder if there was like a moment of conscious there on her deathbed, like, oh fuck, I fucked up, right?
And I don't think she ever thought that. I think she was just like, this is going to get bad if I go. Like we kind of, it was bad before she left. It was not great.
Yeah,
They
but I
beat
think
the shit out of kids and all that stuff before she left. But
for her to tell him it's wrong, that seemed interesting to me. Say, let these people go. It's wrong. It's like maybe there was just a little like, oh no, I haven't had time to repent for this, and now I'm dying, and now I'm fucked.
and it was
I'm not
pretty.
saying it's selfless at all. I'm saying
No.
it's very selfish, but yeah.
And it was precipitous when she was diagnosed to when she died. It was like a couple of months. It was not long before, when they told her. And then like April, she was dead. So, and
Yeah.
it was like, I think she found out in like November or something. So it wasn't terribly long. But yeah. Yeah, sorry. Karma for her was like, and one of the guys, like Carrie, was one of the guys who was in it early and left. But he initially said that was my first thought was karma or irony, I think is what he said. But like,
Yeah. Well, and later on in the series, Chris talks about how vain her mother was and how angry she would have been to know that he did that with her body. To let her like be viewed rotting.
mhm.
It's around this time that the Labor Department and the IRS are going, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
The Labor Department won against Tony $19 million in stolen wages.
Yep.
He appealed. The IRS went, not sure if these people should be tax exempt. But nothing happened to Tony yet. So the next thing he does is he goes to LA and he finds this Swedish fashion designer who looks exactly like Susie.
That was so creepy.
And brings her back. The woman who wrote the book, which I have her name somewhere in this massive pile of notes.
Yeah, the fucking notes. Like I'm trying to find things. That's why it's like I keep doing the because I don't want to miss anything that's really important. But there's a lot. So
Debbie Shriver. She says that she thought perhaps he thought he could bring Brigida there and say, "Look, it's Susie."
she came back from the dead in
Right.
a different body.
Because Brigida is in it. She speaks. It seems to me like maybe she didn't know what she was signing up for. And when she got there, she was like, because she even said she didn't want to be baptized. She didn't know what was going on. Like she thought, I mean, he conned her, right? Like she thought, oh, it's like, this guy's going to help me get my fashion business off the ground.
Yeah, my fashion business.
Like, yeah, you're the first lady of this insane cult and you need to get baptized and blah, 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 blah. And then he, so in come the jackets with Brigida.
Yeah.
These
insanely
ugly jackets. I love gaudy stuff. I love sequins and rhinos. I love gaudy stuff. These jackets were too fucking much. It was very of the time.
Yeah, but if people don't understand what jackets are talking about, there are these jean jackets that used to have like airbrush, like New York and LA or Vegas, and they'd have rhinestones with sort of, and it was just super gaudy. Yeah. And celebrities would wear them. They were really popular, like
Dolly Parton again.
Dolly Parton.
Mike Tyson, Mr. T.
Yeah.
Kind of goes with Mr. T's whole vibe, though.
Yeah, because it was very gaudy. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I would say if you like, oh, here we go. Here's my list of the people they mentioned. Dolly Parton, Mike Tyson, Brooke Shields, Mr. T, Hank Williams Jr., and Sonny Bono. This was not like
Sonny Bono. I forgot that one.
Yeah, well, because they said Sunny as in Sunny and Cher, but
Yep.
Sonny Bono. So you're talking about like this new no genre, this new no like subculture. These jackets were freaking everywhere. Um, Zach, no.
Bad Dak.
Um, but here's the catch, because there's always a catch. The
Of course it is.
children would finish their day, have evening prayer, and then be taken over to where the jackets were made and work till 3 in the morning because they had little fingers that could
Handle the rhinestones.
rhinestones. So all of these people, whether you admire them or not, whether it's Dolly Parton or Hank Williams Jr., were wearing these jackets that were made by children who were horrifically abused, worked into exhaustion, and never, like, one of them even said, like, we didn't even get to have a jacket. Like, that's how little they got out of the situation. They did not exist to be, they were told how much money they were making for the Alamos,
Mhm.
but they were not appreciated. They didn't exist to be thanked or even acknowledged. They were just there to do this horrible sweatshop job.
Yep.
Like many of their parents were working in
The
manual labor
restaurants.
before.
Yeah. To that point, because that's obviously child labor, child abuse. Um, Now they several people mentioned that after Susan died, or Susie, I called her Susan because that's how they
Well, I
named her.
think it's important to say Susie because Susan Balsey talks a lot in
Yeah.
the documentary, and to keep them straight, I was like, okay, Susie Alamo, Susan.
Yep. Yeah. But this is where Tony decides to kind of ramp up. Like, there's always been beatings and kids getting spanked. Um, this is where it kind of, there's a lot of gross bits to this, but when
Yeah.
they would talk about how if the kids were being punished, they would take them and grown men would hold them, and then another grown
Like,
man and just go
like
ahead, Renee.
two men standing, and the kid is arms, legs, like hold them.
Yep, like a looking like just in here like they're planking, and then another grown man would hit them with a large paddle that had a bunch of holes in it that they called the Board of Education,
Right.
and would just beat the kids. And Tony would specify how many swats they
But he
would get.
wouldn't be in the fucking room. This really pissed me off.
Mhm.
If you couldn't tell, he didn't have the balls to be in the room.
Nope.
He'd be literally in the other room on speakerphone.
Yep.
And from the example that we saw, it wasn't like he would call up, give him 50 lashes, hang up. He'd
No.
stay on. And if he didn't get whatever the fuck he wanted out of it, who fucking knows? I don't know. I don't care to know. He'd just say, okay, 50 more. Okay, 10 more. Okay, 20 more. There was no rhyme or reason to this. And the adults were told if they didn't put their back into it, they would get the shit beat out of them.
Yep.
And they were also told, you're saving these kids' souls.
Yeah. So at this point, all the abuse is ramping up, and it's like all the abuse is it's the adults, it's the kids. It's with the kids. You just feel fucking worse because they're kids because they don't have any autonomy.
Right. And they
Yeah.
were born, and most of them were born into this.
Yeah, because they forbade birth control.
Well, and it's like, it makes me think of like oh, I forgot his name. The Westboro Baptist guy. He kept all of his kids and grandkids on this like compound, right? You don't have anything to compare it to.
Right.
You don't have a way to go, wait, I think this might be wrong. The parents did. Now, obvious, like this is where it gets into this thing, right? What we've talked about before. They are victims. They were put under extreme circumstances absolutely designed for Tony to hold control over them. But much like if you are an alcoholic and you get in a car and you kill somebody, you are responsible for the things that you did, even if you were a victim of someone above you. And it's complicated to figure out where that accountability really is. And I wouldn't
Sure.
want to be the person to decide personally.
Nope.
But at the end of the day, if you stand there and you watch your child be beaten like that and you don't leave, you allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
Period. You did.
Mhm.
You literally did allow it to happen. And so, when these people left, and we do hear Susan talk about it later. She said, this is in a later episode, but she said she was watching her grandson, who was like a toddler, and he spilled milk and he started freaking out because he thought he was gonna get punished. And she was just, she's grandma. She's like, "Oh no, honey, like it's okay, it's fine." And then it just kind of all came down on her at once that she had allowed this to happen to her children,
Yeah.
willingly allowed it. And that story kind of sort of has, I wouldn't say a happy ending, like I guess a resolution, because she goes to her adult kids and apologizes. And she's one of the people who's working to, at the time, bring the cult down. But she's the only parent that we hear from besides Carrie. And we'll talk about him later, why I wouldn't class him the same as the other parents per se. But she's the only parent we hear from besides him. And it is implied, like at the time that it was happening, she had no feeling that it was wrong. It wasn't until she had her baby grandchild and saw the fear that that child had of punishment that
Mhm.
she was just like, oh, fuck. And I think that was a very powerful moment. And that's where I say it gets complicated. Where is the accountability? I don't know. I'm glad it's not my job to figure it out.
Yeah. So that before we get into the next step of this, the abuse stuff is we have Justin Miller that we have to talk about.
Well,
And
that's later because the other thing we kind of there's a couple things about Brigida we forgot.
yes, that's what I was getting to.
Okay.
But yes, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. So she knew by the time she got there and she looked around, she's like, "Oh, okay, I look like his dead wife." Okay. And it sounds like he used violence and abuse to get the amount of sex he wanted from her.
Yep.
He said if they had sex 3 times a day, he was wonderful. If they had sex 2 times a day, he would beat her. When it escalated to him trying to strangle her and regular abuse and rape, she left. Um, I find that interesting because there's a couple moments where people want to leave and they do. This isn't a situation where there's like someone who's going to stop you at this point in the story. Later there is, but at this
Later
point in
there
the
is,
story,
yes.
no one's going to stop you. But it is the threat of eternal damnation and complete cutoff from everyone and everything that you know.
Right.
Well, there. And Brigida had something to compare it to. She knew what life was supposed to be like. She had probably been in relationships before. It was different for her. And I think, good for her for leaving. But yeah. Oh, and he'd also said he wanted to marry more women. And she was
Yeah.
like, done. But
Yeah.
he stalked her for years after that.
Yeah. And this is where the first time he starts mentioning multiple wives. That's
Right.
yeah. So yeah, we're going to see that more. um,
And
but good on her for getting out. But yeah,
he
that
did
was that'd have
say
been
something that I feel like is worth mentioning because it kind of made me cold. Well, a lot of things made me cold in this
a
document
lot. Yes.
because we didn't even mention where Susie says something about eating people with salt and pepper on them. Like,
Yeah, and in a television interview, like okay.
but he says he could strangle a man and blah blah blah, kill him, and I'd get away with it. And I was like, oh, who does that sound like?
Yeah, and the parallels to that guy, that fucking guy,
That
TFG,
guy.
are a lot. Like
a lot.
it's some of the rhetoric is the same, like that particular line. Just the idea of like constantly delay tactics in court, like the you know all that sort of stuff just reminded me so much of
A
that fucking
Supreme
guy.
politician. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
because I won't say his name because fuck him. But
it was like and I were watching Hot Fuzz a few years ago,
great movie.
and we get to the point where it's like we're gonna make Sanford great again, and we both just looked at each other like,
Oh no. Wait. That video I sent you the other day with the person getting, they were high on shrooms like 10 years ago and got a
"Oh, an
tattoo
All Lives Matter tattoo on
had a
my
tattoo
head."
that said all lives matter. And now it's like,
Get it,
no, it wasn't that.
get it covered.
Yeah, I could do something with it. Like, I don't know, duct tape it so nobody can see.
So, in the midst of all of this, the Supreme Court says you got to pay that $19 million, bud, and also you're no longer tax exempt.
Yes. Good.
But he is not going to go down that easy. So, apparently, at that time, Miami is having a real estate boom. And Tony wants in on that shit because at this point, he's a millionaire, a multi-millionaire.
Yeah. Because of Miami Vice. We want to make it clear that his
I thought that
inspiration
was
was Miami Vice.
But before Susie died, even they had multiple businesses in this small town. It was not just the restaurant; it was all kinds of businesses, and they weren't paying any wages, so they were making a lot of money.
Yeah. Were
Uh,
they one thing that wasn't really clear, were those businesses paying taxes or was he not paying taxes because he claimed it was part of the church?
they didn't say. Um, I think no, we have not, and we will not stop.
We will not do that.
It's so naughty.
Sorry.
um,
Sorry.
I know so because I've been. Let me start over. I gotta get like, don't sue me for a second. As I mentioned on the show before, I'm an ex-Mormon, a proud apostate. And because I've been following what's happening with Ensign Peak, which is an investment firm run by the Mormon Church, I understand that as far as tax law goes, some things are considered nonprofit if run by the church, and some things aren't. And it depends on why they exist and what they do.
Hmm.
It should not surprise anybody that that's not particularly clear with the $100 billion Ensign Peak that the LDS Church owns. And the documentary didn't make it clear with these businesses that the Alamos owned. But they had a shitload of money. They had multiple properties. They did not sell the property in California when they moved to Arkansas. And it becomes clear that basically it's just another location where there's members of the cult. So anyway, Carrie, this guy that we met early on, is there to buy some real estate or scope it out, I guess. And this is where we meet Justin, who, as an adult, is telling his version of the story. I don't know if you want to take away, Doug.
Yeah. So Justin was actually adopted by Carrie. And his story was pretty sad because he was, when they were scouting out properties and Carrie was looking at different properties, Justin would come over and hang out, and Carrie would like feed him and take care of him. And his mother apparently was a drug addict and was single mom
And also had a seizure disorder on top of it.
had a seizure disorder. So I don't know if she agreed, but Justin went with Carrie to Arkansas.
It sounded like she did, because he was supposed to go for a few weeks.
Yes.
But during those few weeks, his mother died.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrie and his wife made the decision to adopt him, and he was 5 at the time?
Yes, I think he was 5, 6 at the most. He was very young.
Yeah.
So he's there with them now. And initially thought it was great.
Yeah, we hear him talk about how wonderful, because the situation he came from was so bad.
Yeah.
And Carrie really loved him. And we'll see evidence of that as we talk. But he was so excited to have other kids to play with and a loving home with two parents and the safety and the security. And he said, I felt like I had been rescued. And Carrie and his brother owned a trucking company. So they were gone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrie didn't have any kids. His brother had two kids, and that's like a little loose end that we'll get to. But he had no idea how the children were treated because it wasn't something he had any like business with, and he was gone all the time. He was one of the few people who got to keep money from his job because he and his brother turned over so much money to the Alamos that it was okay that they owned their own business and made money. He said he walked in on a beating session, went home to his wife and said, we got to get Justin out of here. We got to leave. And she said, no.
Yep. But his brother was, yeah, we got to leave. And he couldn't convince his wife either. So they decide we're going to leave. So they escape. But it's not an easy escape because apparently as they're running out, they manage to pass security guards. These places had security guards.
They're being shot at in the woods.
Yes, they're being shot at in the woods as they're escaping. So they escape, but their wives and their kids are still back there.
Right. And so Carrie says, and again, it's just Carrie. His brother is not in the documentary. We don't get his side of any of this, but I feel a little squiffy about it because, like, Carrie, I believe that Carrie didn't know. He didn't have kids and he was gone. His brother had kids. So how was his wife explaining to him why they were beaten and bruised?
Yeah, I don't know that. And again, we don't get his perspective. So
who knows? Yeah. And I don't want to like cast aspersions on somebody who didn't tell their side of the story, but it made me uncomfortable. Anyway, Carrie sneaks back onto the compound, breaks into the house looking for his son, who his wife has sleeping in the bed with her. So when he goes in there, she starts screaming for the guards, and he has to flee again while being shot at.
Yeah, it's
not get his son.
Just the idea of, I get why he did that. I would like to think I would do the same thing in his shoes. I would have liked to think that I would have not left without my kid, but at the same time, I've never been in that scenario. We don't know.
And I feel like
the brain works weird.
Like, you're getting shot at. Like, do you want to be holding your child while you're getting shot at? You know, there's so many different things, and we do hear like later also that a lot of people left because they couldn't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they, you know, the brainwashing doesn't break just because you leave, and so there's a lot of different things at play.
Yeah, sure. And he could have. I mean, part of me is like, why didn't he just go to the police? But like, I don't know. Would that have helped?
The police were vilified at that point, and I don't know if we. Oh, it's later, but like, no. There's two parts to this. So they were always told it's okay to lie to the devil, and law enforcement and government was the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe he thought because kid's there with his mom. What are the police going to do about it?
Yeah, we're going to find out what she does about it.
Yeah. So here's where it gets really fucking dark.
Yes, we're going to go. This is, you and I both were like, fuck, when we were watching this.
So I hear Justin as an adult say he felt safe. He was so happy. He'd been rescued. And I like hit pause because I needed to like.
You knew it was coming.
So Justin missed his dad. This guy who saved him, who loved him as his own child. And that's not allowed.
Yeah. No, not at all. Because in the church's eyes, he was a traitor.
And they told him he was possessed by the devil.
They also told him that Carrie and his brother, Justin's stepmom or adopted mom, said that they were both dead to Christ or dead in Christ. So they were dead. They were excommunicado John Wick kind of style. They were just out.
But it's not, you know, that's not how kids work.
No.
And especially not, again, this kid wasn't raised in this environment. I think probably a lot of the other kids had practice at
Yeah.
hiding their emotions. But he wasn't raised in this, and up to that point, I don't think Carrie had any knowledge of how the kids were supposed to be being raised, really. So he is beaten. This is really, I'm going to be a little graphic because I think you need to understand. So this is a point where I would say, if extreme child abuse is going to be a problem for you, like just exit for a few minutes, or exit and watch the rerun and ask us where on the clock it this.
Yeah, we're at 1 hour right now. So if it's something where you need
what-
to exit and come back later, do that.
Yeah. So his mother is there, and I think this is another
That's the mind fuck there.
They lean him over the couch, and 3 men take turns beating him with this board of education. With Tony on speakerphone in the other room, while the other children watch. And he is beaten so badly that there is blood spatter on the other children, even though he is fully clothed.
He was bleeding down through his pants. Like
this, I knew it was going to be bad. I had no fucking idea. You know what? Like, we kind of try to keep it light here because everything we talk about is super serious, and you kind of have to be able to swallow it. Like, it's your spoonful of sugar. There's no way to be anything but dead fucking serious about this. This is one of the most horrific things I have ever heard. And he is an adult telling this as a child what happened to him. And he said he looked up at his mom and he said, "It's not fair." And she said, "Shut up, you deserve it." I don't know what happens to a child when the person that they think of as their mother says that.
Yeah, someone who is supposed to be protective of you.
He had such a shit time with his biological mother, and then these people, he viewed them as his parents. It wasn't like, yeah, I mean, he viewed them as his parents, and she said, "Shut up, you deserve it." And he said he was so badly beaten, he had to walk around with pillows for weeks afterwards, because when he sat down, he had to sit on pillows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's horrible no matter like who it happens to. It's particularly horrible to think that this kid really thought that life was going to get so much better for him.
Yeah, and it's just,
and his dad tried to get him out.
Yeah. It is the most chilling bit, is just the idea that the mom said, "Shut up, you deserve this." Like, that could very easily cause a psychotic break. Like, I'm not saying that flippantly.
No, because you hear about kids who say, "I know why the other parent didn't stop it, because they were afraid too." But it always, like, there's trauma from the fact they didn't stop it. There is a huge difference between didn't stop it and told me I deserved it. And this is after he had been through so much. And, you know, the thing is that kids kind of naturally blame themselves for things.
Yep.
So there's a good chance that he hadn't completely gotten over blaming himself for what happened to his mom, like his biological mom.
For sure.
So
that one's heartbreaking, and
that's episode 2.
Yeah, that's episode 2. So now we're going to episode 3. So
I want to warn you guys going forward. Every episode gets worse.
Yes, this episode, yes, there's a lot of bad stuff, but there's also a lot of government investigation stuff in which
this is like where they're like, "We'll let you breathe a little bit."
Yeah, a little bit. And then episode 4 is just like, to be completely transparent, I watched the last episode today because the previous day I watched episodes 1 through 3, and I was like, I cannot watch episode 4. Like, I just can't. And I said, I'm going to watch it. And you were like, I'm glad you did, because I was a dummy and watched it right before bed.
Because what I did is I watched episode 1 on Monday.
Well, I watched it Monday as well. And then I watched episode 2 and 3.
Yeah, I was like, this is a lot, but okay.
Yeah.
Then I watched 2 and 3 Tuesday morning before I went to work. And then I didn't have time to finish it until right before bed. And that was a bad decision. And look, this is like, I said this to a friend. This is my hobby. This is what I do for fun. I watch cult documentaries. I listen to podcasts about cults. I read books about cults. When it's not cults, it's true crime. When it's not true crime, it's crime thrillers. Like, this is what I do. I love horror. I love, I was fucking floored.
It is something where you and I are both fans of horror books and movies, and I don't think I've ever been more floored by something like floored's a good word by
The
anything
only
like
thing that
that.
could
You
remotely
think
compare is Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, which was based on a true story. And he doesn't
I,
even get that graphic. It's kind of one of those things where, like, you know how bad it is by the fact that Jack Ketchum himself would not put it on paper.
yeah. Ooh, So,
okay.
all right. So, episode 3. Let's start with. So, let's start with some legal stuff at least, so that we can get a bit out of the horror that was that. And I know I pronounce horror weird, so
That's okay.
um, the law is still after Tony Alamo. They're still trying to figure out how to get this guy.
So
But yeah, but the court stuff involves also Carrie and Justin. When all this happened, when the beating actually didn't happen in Arkansas, because
that's right. We forgot to say that
yeah,
once Carrie tried to get Justin back, Tony moved them to California and didn't tell Carrie.
yep.
But that
So
actually enabled him to get Justin back in the end.
yeah, so Carrie and his brother heard some sort of grapevine somehow that they were there. So this allows them to get a court order to try to get Justin and Bob's kids. Bob's is Carrie's brother. Out of it's the Saugus, California camp compound, which I don't know where Saugus is. I'm assuming that's the one that's 45 minutes north of Hollywood.
Yeah, I forgot to look it up.
Yeah. So what they do is they do an insurance. They decide to charge him with child concealment and kidnapping across state lines. So those are not small charges. Those are serious charges.
Well, I don't know that that's what Tony was charged with, because okay. So what
No, this is what the court order was about. It's not necessarily they were charging him, I guess, but
so what ends up happening is they do like a pretty big raid because they kind of didn't know what they were going to walk into.
Yeah, because this was not far long after Waco, which Waco gets mentioned several times in this documentary too.
So the cops come in, and all of these children and all of the adults as well have been trained to believe that if the cops come, we're fucked, we're going to die.
That they're going to kill you.
They're literally the devil. But also, like, Tony used footage from Waco as propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot going on here. And so Justin's terrified, and someone comes and pulls him off his cot and shoves him under it to hide him. And I mean, I can't even imagine what's going through this kid's head, right? It's just
Me either.
Or any of the kids, to be fair. Like, it was not fun for any of those children. But again, so they get him and they get his cousins, and he's terrified. And the cops say, it's going to be okay. Your dad's outside.
By the way, when there's a raid where you have the parents sitting outside, if you don't know how the raid's going to go and you think like there might be firefights, why the fuck are you bringing civilians?
Here's an interesting side note, fact, whatever. Many, many years ago, when my now 13-year-old was just like 2 or 3 months old, at about 7:30 in the morning, my dog started nutting up. And I look outside, and there's like a toddler between the two cars in the driveway. Ducks down, and he pops back up. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, there is a naked toddler wearing nothing but a pull-up diaper in my front yard, right? So I go out, and I'm like, it's early in the morning. Kids are kids. Like, he probably just got out and his parents were asleep. So, all right, I take him by his hand. All right, is that your house? No. Is that your house? No. We get all the way to the end of the corner, and I'm like, well, I gotta go home now because my kid is home alone.
Yep.
Not that kids roll off the bed. Like, rolling off the bed was the threat, not like running away. But anyway, so I take him home and I call the sheriff. And then my friend was coming over for coffee, and I'm like, I need you to hurry up because I don't know what the fuck to do. And I tell the sheriff, like, I don't know this kid. I don't know anything about him. He's barely verbal. Somebody needs to come get this kid. And to me, it's very important to note I was 25 years old. I was mother to a newborn. I did not know this child, and they had no idea who I was.
Right.
I could have been anybody. I could have been a pervert. I could have been someone who beat children. I could have fed that kid something he was allergic to because I did feed him and give him clothes because it was cold and he was hungry, right? And we're trying to get information out of him to give to the sheriff, and he can't really talk. And I'm just like, oh my God. So over an hour later, they show up with that kid's dad. And I was like, you brought this person to my house?
Yeah.
Like, if there's a CPS investigation, because the sheriff also told me this isn't the first time they dealt with this family. If there's a CPS investigation, that guy now knows where I live. What the fuck? So that's just to illustrate that I don't think the cops always know what to do in these situations.
Yeah, we have a lot of evidence that the cops don't know what they're doing a lot of times.
Yeah, I was terrified for months after that. And it's funny because, like, I live in a really small town. So me and my friend who was there that day helping me, we kept looking for the father's car to figure out, like, how far this kid got, and we never found it in our neighborhood. So I have no idea how far that kid wandered.
Huh. Okay. That's a great little side story. And honestly, weirdly more cheerful than the rest of the stuff we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. So they say your dad's outside, everything's going to be okay, and he is traumatized and half brainwashed, and he doesn't know that everything's going to be okay because maybe they were right and his dad is possessed by the devil.
Yep. And then Carrie tells him, I'm going to take you to Disneyland, California one. Sorry, I always confuse Disneyland.
That's the California one, yeah.
Yeah. And that actually, for some reason, kind of cracks Justin a bit to be able to trust him and hug his dad.
And I think that is, again, because he had something to compare real life to. He's in Miami. There's Disney World is in Florida. He was, like, I'm sure he saw stuff on the Disney Channel or whatever. So he had a reference, and I think it would have been harder with a kid who'd been there forever.
Yep. So that's good, but also the Justin's cousins get pulled out.
Yeah, we don't get a lot about them. We just don't. Their dad didn't want to be in the documentary or wasn't available or whatever. So we don't really know their story, but we know that they got out.
Yeah, but what comes out of this is Justin actually will then tell the police about the beating he received, that there's other beatings. He actually told them that his mother did nothing. Like, I imagine as Carrie, that guy being like, fuck. Like, that would be like,
You want to believe, like,
the amount of guilt I would feel if I was him, I would feel enormously guilty that happened.
I feel like it's like on the level of, like, and this is going to sound like an exaggeration, but I don't think it is. I feel like it's on the level of Ted Bundy's girlfriend. To just be like, holy shit, like, I was in love with that person. I trusted that person. I built a life with that person who did that, because it's your child. Or, God, am I the only one who thinks this is our child? Is she one of those people who doesn't think, like, there's so many things I feel like would be going through your mind to find out that your spouse did that.
Yeah.
It's incomprehensible to me.
Same. But out of this, the police end up finally charging Tony Alamo with child abuse for ordering the beating of Justin. So finally, there's some actual police charges against him. Like, right now, it's been IRS and Department of Labor, but this is actually the first police charges against him. Of course, he doesn't turn himself in.
I say, what phrase in the documentary pissed me off the most? Tony didn't turn himself in. Why the fuck did he have to turn himself in?
How about go arrest him?
Right?
And what's interesting is there's a part of this documentary that when they start talking about Alamo when he's in Arkansas, and where the religious aspect comes into play. In California, that's not so much of a thing. Like, they're not going to give that as much sway. But what the fuck were they doing? Like, if somebody has a warrant out for them, you go arrest them. You don't just be like, they'll turn themselves in when they turn themselves in. Like, what the fuck was that?
You get like a decent idea where he is because you busted the kid out.
Yeah.
Because at this point, Tony had not fled. He simply had not turned himself in. He didn't flee until Carrie and his brother sued him.
Yep. So I find this part really super interesting because it shows you the amount of fear and terror he instilled in the people that followed him, because he is fleeing and running from the police and running the church by phone calls. He's
And
not even
tapes.
physically there. And tapes. Oh yeah, you would record tapes and send them, and those would be the sermons. Play this sermon. Like, Jesus mighty Christ.
But that was a thing that Jim Jones did and Father Divine did in their respective cults. Jim Jones got it from Father Divine. We'll get there. But someday we're going to do Jonestown and we'll get there. But anyway.
Yeah, that unfortunately, I'm not sure we can cover that in 2 hours.
No, that's going to be like a very special multi-part. I don't know.
I think it's going to have to be.
But we'll do it someday.
Mm-hmm.
When we start getting paid for this or something. I don't know. Anyway, because it's going to be hard.
Oh, you'll get paid for this? Wow.
Well, I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook had, because Jim Jones taped everything. Yeah. They all fucking tape everything. It had the audio tapes of the massacre. And you can find them if you want to find them. I suggest you don't. Anyway. But it wasn't just that he would tape the sermons and send them. He said, well, now they're on tape, so you should just listen to them all of the fucking time. So we had the children, they're adults now, obviously, talking about listening to these tapes constantly, which I just want to point this out. If you go to SEER school, which is like the survival school that like special ops people have to go to, Navy SEALs, shit like that. That's one of the torture tactics that they use to get you used to what the enemy might do to you if you're a prisoner of war.
Right.
Anyway, so one of the women who was born into this cult and survived it shares that she was beaten so badly she has permanent hearing loss.
Yep.
Because in a sermon on tape, Tony said, I told Rebecca XYZ, and she said to someone, oh, he didn't tell me that. So he ordered her to be beaten so badly that she, to this day, has permanent hearing loss.
Yep. And they also didn't, like, Alamo didn't just order her to be beat. He said, smack her across the face. And he was on the phone. And they smacked her across the face. And when they were done, he said, I don't think you guys really put your back into that. Do more. And yeah.
Here's the thing, too, with that is, to her, I don't think this mattered because she's a kid who's being beaten. But I think, like, if I slap you in the face versus punch you in the stomach, there's an element of difference in emotion, right?
Yep.
Like, that is meant to humiliate. That is meant to take you down a peg. That is meant to make you feel powerful. Mm-hmm. Even more so. And like I said, I don't think it matters to a child, but I don't think he has any fucking idea about anything, about anybody but himself. So whatever. But slapping someone in the face is specifically a humiliating thing to do. And I think that's why he did that.
Yeah, because the nerve endings in your like cheeks and all that are really close to the surface. And it's like if you get slapped in the nose, like as you can tell, I've had my nose broken many times. That's why it's like super crooked and everything. But there is,
I couldn't tell, Doug, you're fine.
It is so disorienting to have your nose hit because it's right in the middle of your fucking face and your eyes water because of it. Same thing if you get slapped. There's like you said, there's a humiliation that goes along with that. More so if you get punched in the stomach, there's almost a machismo affiliated with that is not with, and especially if you're in like some sort of religious thing where toxic masculinity is so rampant.
Mhm.
Like the idea of like getting slapped is like that's making you feel effeminate.
I also just feel like it's like art imitates life, right? And in popular culture, you get slapped in the face when you have done something so egregious, right? Like
Or dumb.
or dumb. Yeah, it's like it's very like I don't know. I just I hated it. I hated it when they talked about it. I hate it now. I'm having a hard time putting like words to my feelings about it. I
Mhm.
feel like mostly people get what we're talking about because you get it, but like yeah, it just feels intentional that beating her isn't enough. You have to make her feel humiliated.
Well, because he proclaimed that by her disagreeing that she was calling him a liar.
Right. Which
And
is
that
like,
is something he didn't tolerate. And what the heartbreaking thing she said, which I didn't care about getting hit because that was normal. Because what she cared about was they basically stuck her in a room and said you can't talk to anybody.
yeah.
That was what hurt her, was not the fact that she was getting the shit beat out of her and that she lost hearing. It was that, oh, well, we're going to put you in this room and you're not going to be able to talk to anybody.
And when we get into the next episode, he does that to somebody else, and we'll talk about how that fucking turns out. Anyway, so he didn't show up to court when he got sued, so the Millers won.
Mhm.
Um,
Not an inconsiderable amount.
they didn't get like any of it really, though, right? Like that's
Yeah, you see, the judgment was for 1.8 million, and Carrie said they saw maybe $7,000.
but I do respect that he was like, it wasn't about the money. It was just like we wanted to liquidate their assets so they couldn't continue.
Mhm.
Which I like Carrie.
Yeah, I do too.
I believe that he didn't know the beatings were happening.
I agree. I don't think because he didn't have kids, I don't think he knew. And I think because he was gone so much on top of it, because him and his brother had a trucking business, that that very, very likely is the case. I
Yeah,
believe him
and we
any.
hear about that a lot, right? In these high control situations, it's everything is like compartmentalized and behind a different door, and there's always these things that like once someone finds out about that specific thing, they're like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" Right?
Right.
And this time it was like my own child is in danger. Anyway, so
Oh, for that judgment though, the other thing is Alamo was on the run for 2 years. He wasn't anywhere.
here's the thing, Doug. I don't believe for a second he was on the run. They had fucking multiple compounds, and we find out later that they had people who didn't live on compounds who were members of the organization. I
Yep.
mean, he was just fucking living it up, and just no one would say that he was there.
Yeah.
But because of this, because he got this judgment for $1.8 million and he wasn't there to pay it, the police are allowed to raid the compound for anything they can sell.
Yep.
And Tony decides that the one thing he can't live without is Susie. So he busts up the mausoleum and takes her corpse.
Yeah. He orders a couple of guys to go and then to go and smash the mausoleum so they can take her coffin. So yeah. But also in this, while that, not only that, he basically the people when the cops come, they start just fucking fleeing like rats off of a sinking ship because
Well,
that's what they were told to do.
that it's gonna be another Waco.
Yep.
Because again, I want to. So we're going. A lot of stuff happens in every cult that we cover. But I want to remind you that this started in 1969.
And we are in
He was charged with
19.
child abuse in '88. He wasn't sued until after it was clear he wasn't going to be arrested for it. We're firmly in the '90s right now.
Yep.
Firmly. Every time a new date ran across the screen, I felt sick because I don't know about you, Doug. Well, no, you said I've never heard of these people before,
Me either.
and this
Like
was
that's the
going
thing.
on. Like, even if you want to say that the handful of people who still run services out of strip malls are just stragglers, like there's still Heaven's Gate stragglers. The active cult was going until like 2017.
Yeah.
6 years ago, guys.
Yeah. So while these people are fleeing, they go all over the place. Like and also we don't know where the hell Susie's corpse is, and
We never find out either.
no, all right, we'll get to that.
Yeah. Just warning you ahead of time, people at home.
Yeah, but what I find interesting, and now we're introduced to a few people that come in later in the story, like Amy.
I love it.
She is of the multicolored hair. Actually, Amy is not my favorite. It is Desiree who's my favorite out of these people that come in later.
Amy and Desiree, I feel like, are kind of a package deal, but we'll get
there. Yeah, Desiree's badass, but especially considering what she went through. But so Amy, mother was like really into the Tony Alamo stuff, but she lived in Tennessee. So they housed some of the people who fled the compound. And that's how she kind of gets tied into this. Desiree, I'm not sure how she gets tied into this.
So let's try to quickly cover Amy's story. So she ends up being shunned, which basically just means that she can't leave her room.
Mm-hmm.
And she's miserable and she can't talk to any of her friends because all of her friends are members too, whatever. So she asks for a job to like prove herself and earn her way back in. And Tony says, well, you can't work there, but you can work in my house. And everybody knew that if you work in the house, you live in the house. And she told her mom, and her mom said, oh, you're going to marry Tony. So excited.
Yeah,
so excited. It's great news.
We are full in the polygamy element of the story.
He was 14.
Mm-hmm.
So Tony gets out of jail and marries her. And then what happens? Oh, well, you have to consummate the marriage now. And I'm not going to get into the details of this one because personally, that's kind of a thing that's like, that'd be my trigger warning. I don't want to get into the details, but it's graphic. It's horrible. Yeah. It's like just physical, violent rape.
Yep.
Consummate the marriage.
Yep.
And some years pass. And, she says, like, none of the wives wanted to be Tony's wife. They just did it because they believed that they had to do it. Which, actually, I'm going to say that is something that's a little bit unusual about this cult. Because usually you would hear that at least the adult women wanted it. Because of social standing or whatever. Like, people would say, like, I believe that I was being whatever. And I don't think she was lying. I really don't.
No.
So some years pass. Desiree enters the picture and again, shit's about to get real fucking bad when it comes to child sex abuse. So if you need to leave, now's the time. And if now is not the time, it'll be after I say the next sentence. Desiree was 8 years old when she moved into the house to become a wife.
This is exactly right, Zach.
Yeah, Zach, actually, I want to give you mad credit because you usually are like class clown, but you were right. They did not just beat their body, they beat their spirit. These people were purposefully and intentionally broken. Mm-hmm. But Desiree was 8 when she was brought in to become a wife.
8.
And that all of the wives, Amy said, and again, I don't think she'd lie. I think if there was one or two who were like, I don't care, she would have said so because she doesn't have any love in her heart for these people. Right. All of the wives were like, absolutely fucking not. She is 8 years old. What are you doing?
Yep.
We don't really get like a whole lot, right? Like about what they did or didn't do about it or what happened in this medium time, but basically Amy became more and more like obstinate.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
So she like basically started a fight with him and said she wanted to leave. She wanted a bus ticket. Yep. He basically said, if you leave, you'd never come back, which is probably something that works quite a bit on quite a few people. It didn't work on Amy.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, we're in episode 4. We skipped some episode 3 shit. Sorry.
No, there's a few things with episode 3 yet that I want to touch
Yeah.
on very quickly.
Yeah. So anyway, they turn into a doomsday cult after the church fractures and there's people living all over the place. Because of course they do. The end of the world is coming. And this is where Benji comes back in because I felt like this was just. There's so many unanswered questions in Benji's story. But he was put in charge of like the records room and he found his birth certificate and he discovered that his mother was alive and well. And there's an implication that he was just straight up kidnapped.
Yep. So Benji's a sad story. That was something I know that hit you really hard. But some of the legal stuff, let's kind of zip through that because there's some of this. So before we go to the legal stuff, I want to say they showed a clip from A Current Affair, which fucking made me happy because it's like the like that stupid theme. Like, I was like, oh my God, it's Current Affair. Like that was the only bright spot in that fucking show.
John Tesh. Anyway, go ahead.
But so they are now the compound, the Alamo store and the Arkansas compound seized by the IRS for back taxes. And I had asked you, what about Saugus, California? Because
that's why Carrie and his brother didn't get their money.
Yeah.
Because the IRS got the IRS's money. Because the IRS is wonderful, guys. They're great.
Yeah. In this case, they are not so much otherwise. But anyway, 1 week after this raid, Alamo calls a journalist because he can't fucking help himself. Who else does that sound like? That fucking guy.
Guy.
Yeah. So basically rants about the judge ordered the seizure. Said that he was going to try the judge in God's court where he was going to be the judge and he was going to give him a fair trial, but he was going to convict him and have him guilty and hanged. So I
loved every minute of that though.
Yeah.
He's gonna go to court and it's gonna be fair, but I already know how it's gonna end. And then we're gonna hang him by the neck till he's dead.
Yeah. And because of that, the FBI now gets involved because he threatened a federal judge.
Because what the fuck do you do if you're a journalist and you get that phone call? It made the goddamn front page.
Yeah, you can't not do anything about that. Yeah, so now they're trying to track him. So when they went on this raid, and I think it was called Georgia Ridge, which is kind of a generic name for their fucking compound. But so they get a list of like all the people who are members of this church and like their social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers. It's like this complete list, which feels a bit creepy for the government to be doing that. But like at the same time, you're like, okay, yeah, but in this case, maybe that's a good thing. Yeah. They find a cell number in Tampa. And then and what's funny is this is in the 90s. And I always think the 90s is like sort of like the 80s, and that there's there's not cell phones then because I'm fucking old.
But here's the thing. This is interesting. Is like because it seems so normal when they're talking about the cell phone thing, and like also how they get him is pretty normal now. Like we know that this happens, but like in the night, like it was him flaunting his wealth again, because in the 90s most people didn't have a cell phone,
and the cell phones were like, here's this clunky thing that I'm going to hold up to my.
They weighed like 20 pounds.
Yeah. So they were able to use like triangulation and find an address. And basically what I find interesting is they do it. They said they decided to drive by this triangulation zone, which was not like a small area. It was like several miles of area. And I'm like,
right. Like it's a lot easier now, but then it wasn't.
Yeah. But they managed to triangulate to an address and they find a van that is owned by a member of the church by the license plate. So they determine that that's where it is. They go and they raid and they find Tony sitting at a table with a whole bunch of money. And obviously Susan's body, they ask him where Susan's body is. He goes, I don't know.
No, that's not where Susan's body was.
No, it was not.
No.
They asked him, but he said, no, I don't
know. I thought you said, okay, sorry. I misunderstood what you said.
Yeah, but the fucked up thing is here. So they bring him back to Arkansas to face charges. And the fucking jury acquits him on these fucking charges. And the reason why the guy said, well, I heard from some of the jurors, yeah, they were worried about the free speech for religious rights. That's what a few jurors were. fucking sorry, Bible Belt Southern folks, but that just made me so fucking mad.
So here's the thing, like, I am a registered ordained minister with the Universal Life Church. It is a church
Same.
that has a it has a physical location in Modesto, California. So I can say whatever the fuck I want. I can make terroristic threats now.
Apparently.
Somehow I doubt it would work that way for me, but whatever.
Yeah. So let's just whiz through these other things. So basically, he has he based Big Brother. There's some other things where he's freed on $2,000 bond on another charge, and the people were like, he shouldn't have been because he had fled. Like he was
right, like the guy, he's a fly risk. He's got a shit ton of money, and he's already done this several times.
Yeah. So Alamo tells the remaining like the core members, hey, go to Fort Smith, Arkansas. I don't know, some other small fucking town. So he orders them to buy a building, start a church. Sue Ballsley goes back to the church, which just fucking like you're out.
Yeah.
So she goes back in. I want to make the comment that Tony Alamo now looks like a mafia dime, where before he looked like fucking Elvis.
Well,
And
so he went from like Elvis to Jim Jones to Mafia Don. Yeah.
What I also find interesting here is as his new church, he comes in and he decides to do a foot washing ceremony, which in Christian circles is a big thing, right? I'm going to let you talk about that bit because I don't know much about it. I just know it's a big thing.
I don't know a ton about it. I know that the Moonies do this.
Okay.
But in the doc, it's explained like this is a thing that you would do, like to express remorse to someone you have wronged, which I don't think that's how it actually is in most Christian circles. Because in most Christian circles, it is reminiscent of Jesus washed the feet of the poor, of sex workers, of people that were rejected by society.
Right.
And so it wouldn't have anything to do with like, he wasn't apologizing to poor people. Jesus, if you believe in the New Testament, was pretty nice to poor people. So there's some weirdness in there about like what the fuck was going on with that. I don't really know. Like I've never heard of it as an apology. Although if anyone wants to like pay for me to get a professional foot massage as an apology for something they've done, that's cool. But like you personally may not touch my feet.
Yeah, and the other thing is he does so basically he uses it as an apology tour, which interesting is that while he's doing that, give me those piggies. Like he did this whole thing. I'm gonna wash those piggies. I'm like, it's like the dude, that's like all right, you're already you're a fucking creep. Don't do that too. On top of that, more than creepdom.
So Doug,
yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question that I wish hadn't popped into my head, but if I don't ask it, it's just going to be. Do you think it was like his thing? That's why he did it?
He was a sadist and masochist, so
Yeah,
why
but like
not?
that doesn't mean you can't have a foot fetish. Yeah.
No, foot fetish folks are not by and large fucking sadists or masochists. That's not
No,
what
but
it
I
is.
mean like they're different. So like in these communities where people do this with consent,
Mhm.
you could be both of those things and not be hurting anyone.
Exactly.
Right? So but you could have all kinds of other things that you're into.
I think this was. I don't know that it was his thing. I think it was much more into the physical abuse. I don't think that was his
Piggy's
thing.
thing just really fucking didn't sit right with me.
I think he did this as a means to pretend that he was apologizing, making
Okay.
it for. I'm just atoning for my sins. Because Jesus
He
did
was calling
that.
himself God by the
Yeah.
end. So I mean, because they always fucking do, whatever.
Yeah. But he's still attracting fucking followers, which is like nuts. But it's just funny. One of the persons was like this lady named Lisa Pierce, who was like a psychology student and like came into this and just like bought into the persecution stuff, which the persecution stuff is like full bore right now. Like everything's about, well, everybody's trying to silence me and blah, blah, blah. And forgive me for those of you who are Christian. I'm not meaning in a general sense. I mean evangelical style, where you are like the whole persecution complex where you think in America as a Christian, you're being persecuted. You are not. If you're a Christian if you're a Christian in other cultures, you might be. You are not here.
70% of all Americans identify as Christian. You are not being persecuted. It
Nope.
would be impossible.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a whole wing of our two-party system that is entirely devoted to you. So please shut up about being persecuted.
Well, and like, call me when the Democrats elect an atheist or someone, a Muslim, right? Like, it's whatever. Everybody is.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is 70, like, it's bullshit. And if you are offended by that, like, you can check my work. Those are real stats.
Yep. So we need to go more into.
I go back to Amy. That's okay.
What's that? Go ahead, because I have some more legal stuff, but let's do the Amy stuff now.
Because I just glanced at something in my notes that's really heartbreaking. After he married her, which the marriage ceremony is, he goes and takes a ring out of like a drawer where he has a bunch of rings. Mm-hmm. Very romantic. And they go into a room together, and he puts the ring on, and he's like, blah, 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 blah. We're married now. Now it's time to consummate the marriage. And he very brutally raped her. She was not having a good time. That's such an understatement. I regret saying it like that. Like, I can't. She describes some of the stuff. She's in terror the entire time. She was threatened. She was just whatever. But she said what she kept thinking to get herself through it was, when this is over, I'm going to go play outside.
Yep. And if you don't think that's a kid thing, the way to get through trauma, then you aren't paying attention, because that was a fucking heartbreaking thing to hear. We've said that multiple times in this episode, but it was heartbreaking to hear some of the ways that these kids kind of managed to get through this abuse.
So Amy got out, and Desiree managed to contact a relative. The 8-year-old Desiree managed to contact a relative that could get her out.
Yeah, but she wasn't 8 at the time. This was like 8 or 9 years later, after she was married to him or something.
I forgot to say that, because obviously, yeah, an 8-year-old, that would be weird. But right, because when Amy started as a wife, she was 14. She was an adult when she got out.
Yep. Yep, she was 22, I think, when she got out.
Yeah, I think so. It does seem like a lot of the wives left at the same time, but we only hear from 2 of them, so I can't be like 100% on that.
Yeah, and we didn't hear from any others, really. Like, yeah, there's a few other women that show up that talk about it, but they're not really. I'm not sure that they're specified as wives, but they were in the house. So yeah,
but we know that some of the women. Okay, we didn't cover this, but like, if you're in the house, you're either a wife or you're eventually going to be a wife.
Yep, that is the line of succession.
Here's the weird thing, because we kind of forgot to mention it, but when he met Brigitte, he did not even kiss her until they were married.
Yep, and then turned into like, you need to fuck me 3 times a day.
Right, and then Amy says that he didn't have sex with her until he put the ring on her finger, which he viewed as a marriage. So I wonder if there's an element of these ladies in waiting, which I hate to use that word because they were victims of that phrase, but like, that maybe they didn't understand the fullness of how fucking awful it was going to be.
Yep. No, they didn't know. They thought it was going to be fabulous.
Even though they were living in the house. Because, like, I'm sure that if you're not allowed to miss your dad, you're not allowed to tell people how upsetting it is to be raped by Tony Alamo. And Amy actually said at one point too, like, one of the adult wives came to her and gave her graphic details of her childhood sexual abuse at the hands of her
brothers,
in order to gauge if Amy was a virgin. Which is like, I don't know, man. Like, what is the virgin versus non-virgin response to sibling sexual abuse?
Yeah, and she said she had no idea about sex, so she was like, I don't know. Like, I was like, what? Like,
well, I mean, it's insane. It's horrible and it's insane, and that's all there is to say about it. But I wanted to mention that because it gives some perspective on the levels of abuse. That there wasn't one way that he controlled people, even specific groups of people. He had like layers upon layers to make sure that there was, because people were cocooned in abuse.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, before we get into the last episode, which we talked a bit about it, but there's something before we wrap up into that because the feds decide to proceed with an IRS case because that's actually most likely to get him convicted and put him in prison.
And they
Al
acknowledge that, like they compare it to the Al Capone thing.
Yep, and that was a great comparison considering all that's going on. So he goes on trial for tax evasion and fraud in summer of 1993. Still free on bond. Not great. This is where we get into Sue Bosley comes back into the fray here because she had also exited the church again, I think, and she gets invited to a restaurant in Memphis where his trial is starting for tax evasion and fraud. And so she meets him at the restaurant, and several kids that she used to babysit are sitting around him.
That's right.
He calls them his wives and then kisses them in front of Sue, which completely fucking horrifies her.
She is like, what the fuck? Which,
yep.
A+, Sue.
Yeah, A+ on you. So July 8th, 1994, found guilty on all tax charges. So he gets sentenced to prison for 6 years. So he gets to start
6 years.
So where he continues to run the church from prison
via phone calls and audio tapes, and now he gets to say, "Hey, I told you they were going to persecute your prophet, and look what they did. Everything I said was going to happen is happening." Yeah.
So he orders the members there to move to Folk.
Oh,
Arkansas. What a name, Folk, Arkansas. Fouke. I had to spell that. So he moves that all members who have children, whether they're in California or wherever, move to Arkansas.
This is upsetting. I think it's mentioned pretty explicitly, like the reason it was all members with children is because he wanted to set himself up when he got out.
Yep, for sure. And while he's there in prison, he promotes the idea that any girl who menstruates is a woman, anyone. So basically, he's setting himself up to be able to have wives who are as young as he sees fit.
One of the things I mentioned early on is that they kind of show us stuff out of order while keeping chronology. And one of the first things we see in episode 4 is he's giving testimony in a court trial. And the attorney who is questioning him asks, how do you, let's say you want to marry an 8 or 9-year-old girl. How do you know that she has reached puberty? I can give everybody a minute to just like go like yarf in a trash can and come back.
Yep.
He says, well, in my church, they're trained very well. They would come to me and say, I've reached puberty. Can we get married now?
I would also like to point out, like we talked about Susan's vanity some. Tony's vanity is something that's also part of this because he, there's various stages of how he looks. And I'm not here to bag on people how they look because everybody looks however they look. But when he was younger, he tried to look like Elvis. He always had like the sunglasses kind of thing, like the Easy Rider kind of sunglasses. And then later on, he turned into look like a mafia don. Still had sunglasses on when he was preaching from the pulpit. And when he's talking like this, he's in a jumpsuit and his hair is completely gray. His hair was always black.
Dyed
Like a motherfucker. Beard dyed. And then with this, and then there's a later bit that we'll get to where he is completely bald. Like he looks like my dad.
And the tie-dye shirt.
Yeah. So he has my dad is, in his 70s and he has hair that goes like this, but his head up there, no hair.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not going to talk shit about anybody who dyes their hair because a lot of this was gray before it was green. And it is what it is. Okay. Do what you want.
It looks fucking fabulous.
I know. But I think I didn't realize his vanity until they showed him walking out of the courtroom in a tie-dyed t-shirt bald. And then I was like, oh, this is striking because he always did look put together.
Who else does that? That fucking guy.
What are you talking about, Doug? I can't figure it out.
I don't know. Oh my God.
So that happens. And then Desiree finds a family member to rescue her, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And she alerts the FBI as to what's going on with the child brides and the sexual abuse.
Well, first the FBI goes to try to get Amy to testify, and she said no. But
well, yeah. But Amy kicked it, or sorry, Desiree kicked it off, but Amy was terrified to testify.
Yes, correct.
And I didn't want to get into a whole thing about this. I believe that. I believe that she was terrified. I know there's a lot of statistics, there's a lot of whatever, like people in normal, I hate using the word normal.
What's normal? Anyway.
Your average human being who has been sexually abused or raped has a fear about reporting. And there's a million good reasons for that. Now take somebody who was born into and indoctrinated into a cult and married at 14. Like, I fucking get it. I don't have any ill will toward her. I fucking get it. But Desiree, who was much younger, who was still a minor at the time, was willing to tell all. And this is where things really get real for Tony Alamo, as they should have done decades before.
Yep. Well, so for that, so now the FBI have been trying to build a case, and one of the things Desiree lets them know, which got the FBI thinking, okay, now we have an inroad. Whereas Desiree made the comment that Tony took Polaroids of underage girls naked.
Mm-hmm.
So once it gets into child pornography and all that stuff.
There was that, and that he moved one of the wives from one of the compounds to another compound in another state. So those two things together gave them the ability.
Yes, and raped her in a bus on the way in another state. So yes. So
again, I warn you guys, it only gets worse. So I'm sorry, but that's where we're at. We're at the worst.
Yeah. Also, we should point out that Desiree begged her mom to have her to take her out of the compound, and her mom refused, just like Carol did. Carol refused.
Carol being Carrie's wife,
Carrie's wife. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that in several cases, so Desiree's young, like she's just like, fuck this, like that's the thing is like that's her story is like just holy shit, and just the idea that she was willing to be like, no, I'm gonna go do this. Good on her.
Right, she is a fucking warrior because again, she was married to Tony Alamo and began being raped and abused by Tony Alamo at 8 years old. 8.
Yep.
That's like 3rd grade.
Yeah. It's rough because there's some things that Alamo's still doing. So like he had this thing called the House of Scorn, where girls who didn't do what he wanted were sent. It was a greenhouse and you were locked in it. So he's still isolating people. Mm-hmm. There's times in his sermons when he would stop in the middle of the sermon and just berate the shit out of one of his wives. And I'm using wives in air quotes because they were underage. Right. It's weird to talk about the devolution of him because he was a shithead to start and he just got worse.
Yeah, it is funny to be like, I don't know. I mean, if you watch Breaking Bad from the right lens, Walter was never the good guy, but he was at least a better guy.
I've never watched that show.
Oh, it's really good. You should. I'll talk to you on camera. But it's worse than that in a lot of ways. But what we hear from Chris, Susie's daughter from before she met Tony, I knew he was raping those girls because he did it to me. So
and Susie refused to believe her daughter.
yeah, called her a liar. So we know, like, when she says that, we know that this wasn't an escalation. This wasn't like I got a certain amount of power and I feel like exploiting people with it. This was a thing that it was always a part of him. Not that I believe anybody rapes children like out of the fucking blue, but
Nope.
he was much like Keith Raniere. This pattern started well before he was doing it as a cult leader.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Now Rainier is his own thing, but this like there's degrees, and it feels worse because it's kids. It's
Oh,
bad
yeah,
either way.
100%. I mean, it's just like, and because they were raised in this environment, they did not have a
They
way
didn't have any frame of reference.
even
Nope.
have the ability to say this is not normal. The fact that the wives looked at what was happening to Desiree and went, "What the fuck," is like actually kind of surprising
Yeah.
because there's no evidence of anybody in this organization feeling that way about anything that Tony did, including keeping his wife's corpse in the fucking living room for a year, not in secret.
And that barely gets touched in the docuseries, which is kind of fucking hilarious. And so
Much goes on. Like, I'm sorry.
that is a fucking bonkers thing, and it just
You didn't
barely
spend
gets
very
touched
much time
on.
on it either, Doug, because it's just way too fucking much to cover. We're almost at 2 hours now and we're not done.
I know. One of the things that Desiree does do is she also helps the FBI get in contact with somebody named Summer, who was an underage wife of Tony Alamo's,
Mhm.
and she was 11 when she got married to him.
Yeah, and they show her
Uh,
picture when she was 11 years old, and you see just
how young? Oh my God!
and then in seeing that picture of that 11-year-old and just feeling like the weight of that hit you, you remember that Desiree was 8.
Yeah, and yeah,
It's just
that's why Desiree is just a fucking badass to me. Just
she
like
super is. Like, I don't know how somebody comes out of that with their mind and spirit intact.
me either.
I really don't. I think she's an amazing person.
Yeah, but Summer's kind of the fulcrum because she's the one that was taken across state lines and unfortunately raped and everything. So that gives them the opportunity to go raid the house again. This new Arkansas compound in Folk.
This is like the third or fourth time now, by the
Yep.
way.
At the time of the raid, there were 6 underage girls in the house.
They didn't find any child porn though. They only found the cameras and unused film, but they did find, and this really fucked me up for some reason. I don't know why this is the detail that fucked me up. A drawer full of wedding rings.
Yes.
Like, it's, I don't know. I guess it's like the premeditation involved in it. Like, I got to be prepared. I don't know. That really fucked me up. Um,
Yeah.
and ovulation tests.
Got to keep
Because
that
even this
pipeline.
motherfucker doesn't want the responsibility of being a father.
I think it's the opposite. I think he wanted to father kids so he would have a pipeline of more
Well, but
kids.
we didn't hear about any of those women being pregnant.
No, we did not. So to
I
that,
think that he was, yeah.
that's all a supposition on my part, but that's what I think.
I think both theories are valid. I'm going to say that. But my take was, I mean, he just strikes me as the kind of guy who has like the whole Madonna horror thing going on.
Fair.
He needed his brides to be virgins and children and all of that. I don't know. But I think there's a good chance you're right too.
Yeah.
I hope to never know for sure.
I would like to. I'm not sure I ever want to research more of this because of how fucked up it is. So when he gets raided, Alama's not there.
Never
So you
is.
know, but this is kind of a really sad bit. Is like a lot of these kids were pulled out of the house and put into foster care, and the parents were told all you have to do is raise your kids outside of this church. Some of the parents did, some of the parents did not to get their own children back.
That ruined me.
That just fucking hurt my heart to hear that.
I fucking swear to God, like, because the exact phrasing was some of them did, many did not. And it's just like, Jesus Christ. This is your kid. Like, show up for your kid once because you haven't.
You didn't. And the idea that you'd be like, well, I can't go against him, and those are your fucking children. Just
Here's what I will say though is Amy said she was born in what, 95?
92.
92? Okay. I was born in 1984 and I'm 39. So there's a really like it started in 69. There were mothers who were born into this cult and
Yep.
fathers who were born into this cult.
Yep.
And I'm not excusing it because like I say, there's this weird thing where there's no like it's all gray where the accountability lies. But at the end of the day, when you fuck with kids, I get mad. And that is just where it is. I couldn't be around somebody who allowed that to happen to their children. I don't care if intellectually I can understand it. Emotionally, couldn't do it.
Same. Same. You could say, yeah, well, I was brainwashed. Great. I get that. But at the same time, I'm like, you're still an adult. It's like you still had an opportunity to save your kids or other kids or whatever the case may be. So I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you. I can logistically understand it. I just can't. I can't be okay with it, you know.
What you hope, I guess, is that you never have a situation in your life where you are forced to figure that out because somebody that you love and care about has been in a situation like this. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. So Alamo's on the run again. Again, because that's what he does.
And where's Susie's corpse?
Yeah. Oh, we have to. When he was released from prison the first time,
I forgot.
He had to. One of the conditions of his release was to be able to give the corpse back, and it was anonymously dropped off at a funeral home
Before he was released. So that means that there were people who knew where the fuck it was this whole time. Like somebody had that shit in their garage.
Hey, what's that? No, don't worry about that.
About that. I bought that on Costco just to be prepared.
Yeah, because that's for me later on, you know.
Yeah, it's one thing to be the crazy guy who keeps your wife's corpse. It is another thing to be the person who keeps somebody else's wife's corpse for them.
Yep.
I can't that fucking threw me. I was like, wait. Because it's not like he could have called and been like, hey, here's where it is, turn it in, because those calls are recorded, and so it wouldn't have been anonymous.
Yep. So it's like somebody's dropping off a baby at an orphanage or something like that. It's very weird.
And just to think about, like, poor Chris, like, she had so many complicated feelings about her mother, and she says that. She said, you know, she's still my mother. All these terrible things happen, but she's still my mother. I just wanted to fucking know where she was buried or that she had been buried.
Yep.
And I think grief for a parent with whom you've had a complicated relationship with is difficult enough without this person I like even less has pulled my mother out of a mausoleum and I don't know where the fucking corpse is.
Yep. It's a mess. All right. So now they're still trying to find Tony Alamo. He, in the middle of being chased by the feds, is like calling into CNN and Fox, like pleading his case. It is the most bonkers thing outside of that fucking guy that you've ever heard.
He got busted the first fucking time because he was using a cell phone. So what the fuck does he use to call these people? Oh, you guessed it.
And he thought he had a private cell phone number that nobody had, and some people did.
It's not the number that matters.
Yep.
And caller IDs exist. Yeah. Anyway, I can't.
Yeah. Well, they find him in Arizona to arrest him finally, and he's bald as shit when they arrest him, which in a tie-dye shirt, which is just, I don't know why that's funny to me. It just is.
It is because it's the moment, like I said, it's the moment where you see him kind of like for what he is on the outside.
Yep.
Because on the inside, he's been horrible from the fucking jump. The moment you hear his name in this documentary, he's horrible. But on the outside, he's like fashionable for the time period of which it's taking place.
Yep.
Kind of got some charisma. He's whatever. And then you see this like fat, bald, old guy in a tie-dye shirt, bad posture. Looks like he just fucking woke up. And it's like, oh, right.
Yeah.
All that was bullshit. And it always has been. Like, you know that it was bullshit. But now you
really know it's bullshit.
Yeah. And like, I might be fat, bald, and old with bad like definitely with bad posture as an old person. And I'll own that. That is not what is striking about it. It's just that he is so put together and so meticulous, and like you said, even dyeing his beard to just see him in a natural state, and he's like talking shit, and
Yeah.
good for him. I'm glad he looked like crap.
Yep. Well, so now they arrest him, and but the thing is we just don't have like Amy and Desiree. They have like 25 or 30 people to testify against them, which is great because they need it. And one of the things that is another heartbreaking bit is Desiree goes on the stand and tells her story, and her mom comes up on the stand and says she's a liar about all of this and is defending Tony. It is like Desiree was an adult at that point, like, and her mom was like, "Nope, that's all a liar. She's a known liar." Like, it's
This
just
is my issue is that I from being a person who's really into cults, I understand that these people could buy into it's okay to lie to the devil and the government is the devil and law enforcement's the devil and all of that, especially after we hit the 90s and he's using the Waco footage as propaganda. Like, I understand that.
Yep.
That's your fucking child. I will never understand saying that child is a liar when you fucking know she was 8. You personally fucking delivered her into that situation. You know that it's true.
Yep. Yeah, the cognitive distance is like just massive on that one. Like, ugh. But on the good news is because of that trial, he gets found guilty on all 10 counts.
Thank fucking God.
And he gets
175 years.
And not run concurrently, consecutive. So it's a life sentence. He's in his 70s at this point, by the way. He's done.
The injustice here is that he should have got 175 years when he was like 40.
Yeah, he should have been a lot earlier. But so, there's some other things where there's a verdict for 1.1 billion for the children who were raped and beaten by him. Apparently they're still seizing assets. That's how many assets he had to try to pay all these things back, which is never going to happen. It's not enough.
Oh, yeah. And you just have to accept that. I will say the other thing is he said, people asked him when he was in prison, do you have a plan for what's going to happen when you die? Who's going to take over? What's going to happen?
I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die.
Well, he was wrong. He did die.
In 2017.
That. But the last 3 notes that I have, Doug, go 2017 and then in all caps, 2017. Next one. Oh God, no, there's more in 2018. Still operating, several exclamation points, apostrophe, in. Because I was just like, because you just want to, like, I don't know. Most of the cults we've covered, with the exception of Nexium, they're in the past.
Yeah.
And especially because this one started in 69 in California. It was like cult fucking central. Nobody got in.
Yeah.
Nobody. I hate it. I hate it.
Me too. And it's because I'm going to say this, like I said, there's a big thing with like super evangelical Christians with persecution. And I'm certain he was persecuted. He was like Jesus. There's a lot of that nonsense going on with that. So that's why they can still go. sadly, it's always preying on people who are at their worst moments or are lost or whatever. And that's what cults
Yeah,
do, prey on those folks.
Rebecca Gay said her mother joined when she was in the worst point of her opiate addiction
Hmm.
and credited the Alamo Foundation with getting her clean.
Yep.
Um, I will. I guess I don't know. I have a lot of complicated thoughts because I really hated that they were still going, especially after he died. You want to feel like if your prophet says I'm not going to die and he dies, then you can. He's full of shit.
Yep.
But the documentary said, they show us one of these congregations. There's more than one.
Hmm.
And when we look at some of these other ones, there's like a smattering, and they're all by themselves. They're not meeting places.
Yeah.
They have multiple meeting places. But it says that it still continues under like Alamo Christian Church or Alamo Christian Ministry, something like that.
Right.
There's no record of ongoing abuse. I call fucking bullshit because they're using Susie Alamo's fucking taped sermons.
Yep.
They're using Tony Alamo's taped sermons, and they both fucking said that you should beat the shit out of your kids. Both of them said that. They were beating children well before Tony went off the fucking rails. So fuck you. Absolutely ongoing abuse is happening.
For sure. Maybe they just don't have any quote unquote people to talk about it, but I'm certain that shit's still going on because that was like a pillar of their faith. So yeah.
Right. It's in the sermons. You can't, it's one or the other. Either the faith continues or they're not beating their kids.
Yeah.
That really pissed me off. I mean, there's no record. That's true. But like, I guess that's like CYA because you don't want to get sued. But like, how much money could these assholes possibly have?
Yeah. Not a lot. I can't imagine. But, there kind of feels like they're kind of scurrying and trying to do this stuff in hiding, which is why they blocked everybody's face out in that bit. But yeah.
It's 2023. These fuckers started in 69.
Fun. Anyway,
almost as old as my mother. This cult is almost as old as my mother.
It's almost as old as me. It's older than me by 2 years.
I was gonna say
2 fucking years. That cult's older than me. Jesus. Oh man.
Young. I'm not like.
Yeah.
I already said how old I was, so you guys know. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm 52. You can put that on a fucking piece of paper if you want. Anyway.
So what do we fucking do? Like, I don't want to leave you guys on this note. Like, it's so bad.
It is, but
you, Zach.
Zach, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Sorry. So we could talk what we're going to be talking about next month, which is actually sort of the impetus for us even doing this show, as I recall.
Yeah. So this is really fun because I think we both knew. I mean, you knew I was a true crime person because.
Yeah, I did. I didn't know you were a cult person.
You know, I was a cult person because that happened after I stopped writing nonfiction. And I didn't know you were a cult person. I don't even remember. We were talking to Greg.
Yeah.
There's some dudes, Greg. Helps us produce the show. And somehow this cult came up and we got really excited. And after getting excited, Greg was like, you guys should do a show about cults.
And we're like, absolutely.
Yeah, let's fucking do it.
So this was the thing. Greg actually watched this, which Greg doesn't watch a lot of culty stuff. But this is what we're going to cover next, which is the Wild Wild Country, which is a story of the Rajanishis, I think, as I'm pronouncing that correct.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So this, you and I actually, I think when we discussed this, we're kind of in agreement on a lot of the stuff.
There's some weird shit in here. I don't know that the documentary does the best job of presenting all of it. We'll get into it. It's probably, I don't know. I feel like it might be another one that goes over 2 hours. I'm just going to say it because there's some conversations to be had about certain people who are involved.
Yep.
And the fucking epilogue on that one is weird too.
Yeah. I haven't watched it in well over a year. So I'm looking.
I mean, like it's not in the documentary, but like in life.
Yeah.
Because once you watch the documentary, you know what you're looking for and you see it and we'll get into it and hold on to your hats, suspense for a whole fucking month.
Yeah.
But,
it was not as depressing as this one, I promise.
No, it's funny. It's a wait, we got to share this one. I love when Doug laughs at me. I love when Renee agrees with me. We love you too, Zach.
Yeah, we do, Zach. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought because that made me laugh so much. But yeah, like there's some. I mean, you start this series and you're like kind of on their side, but the new information comes and you're kind of not. But then more information comes and you're like, wow, everybody fucking sucks here.
As is usual with the human condition, a lot of people suck.
But we'll get into one of my theories about cult response, which I can back up. Also, maybe I'll find some sources on it because this is a perfect example of one of my big theories about how to treat people who are in cults and how to treat cults as organizations. It'll be really fun. I think it's going to be fun. There's a handful of shitty things in it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be anything like this. Thank fuck for that.
Yeah.
Not many things are as bad as this. If we ever fucking do Jonestown, that'll be worse.
That'll be worse.
Heaven's Gate is kind of like mostly weird right up until the end when it's tragic.
Yeah. This was just bad all the way through. Nexium is about the only one that I think was fairly comparable, but it still wasn't as bad.
It was still on such a smaller scale because it was like this tiny group, right?
Yep.
It's weird. The thing that blew my mind about Tony Alamo is that it just went on for so fucking long, and you have multiple raids on these properties, and they just couldn't. I mean, everybody fucking lied for him.
Yep. Anyway,
there's a lesson to be learned.
Yep. Lesson learned.
Don't lie for your preacher or religious leader or guru. Don't fucking do it.
Do not. Especially if they're trying to hook up with kids.
Yeah. If somebody in your life is trying to hook up with children, go directly to the fucking authorities.
Yep. Exactly.
And if you're not going to do that, just let me know and, give me your address just so we can have a chat.
Yep. Exactly. So. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. This was great. Hard. I honestly think it is one of the, I think you both and I agree that this was the hardest thing we've had to cover.
It really was. And because there's these they had so many people willing to talk.
Yeah.
And I think that added some emotional heft to it because some of these stories are so crushing. Desiree's story, Amy's story, even Susan Balsley's story about her experience with a grandchild, Justin's story especially, it's just, they really make it personal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much of it. There's so much of it.
Yep. So, yep, exactly, Zach.
Great insight, Zach, because this is true. And we'll probably talk about it a lot because this is going to be a theme, like we talked about in Waco too. A lot of cults highlight the worth we put on women and children in society because when there's raids, they're like, well, found nothing because the man at the top is nice and charismatic.
Yep.
One of the reasons that I'm interested in cults, and I think we've touched on this before, is that they are a good example of a magnified abusive relationship.
Yep.
So you hear a lot of people who are in an abusive marriage or, domestic partnership, and it's the same thing. They can't get out because everybody thinks they're so nice. Everybody thinks that their partner is so good.
Yep. Yeah, that happens a lot in marriages, and people aren't quite aware of it. But yeah, so at any rate,
on that uplifting note,
yes, hooray! So
pet a cat, pet a dog, watch something cute on Instagram. Use your tools. We love you. We're sorry.
Yep, sorry about this, folks. But thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. And said next week we'll talk about something that's not necessarily uplifting, but better than this.
Yeah.
All right. Ciao, everybody. Love you guys.